The guard was only checking pockets when the German prisoner suddenly twisted away, clutching his jacket like something inside it mattered more than his life. And when the seam ripped open under the flashlight, a strip of cloth slid out covered in tiny stitched names. But the real panic began when another prisoner lunged from the line, grabbed a loose thread with his teeth, and tried to swallow the last name before anyone could read it. The intake shed was crowded with new German prisoners brought in from the Western Road, each man standing under a hanging lamp while American guards searched coats, boots, belts, and pockets before sending them into the holding yard. The process had been quick all morning, until one thin prisoner in a torn gray jacket refused to raise his arms. The guard in front of him ordered him to open the jacket. The prisoner did, but only halfway, keeping one hand pressed against the left seam near his ribs. His face was pale, his eyes fixed on the other prisoners behind him, and his fingers dug so hard into the cloth that the guard stopped searching his pockets and reached for the seam instead. The prisoner jerked back, bumped into a crate, and nearly fell. Two guards caught him by the shoulders. The movement ripped a small hole near the lining, and a narrow strip of darker cloth showed inside the jacket, stitched flat against the inner seam where no quick search would find it. The guard cut the seam open with a pocket knife. A folded cloth strip slid out, rolled tight, and tied with thread. It was not money, not a map, and not an escape tool. When the interpreter opened it under the lamp, tiny names appeared in careful stitches, each name sewn beside a number and a small mark. Before anyone could read the full strip, another German prisoner lunged from the line. He struck the guard's arm, grabbed the loose end of thread with his teeth, and tried to bite it free. Three men pulled him down, but not before one stitched name disappeared into his mouth. The intake shed erupted. Prisoners shoved backward, guards lifted rifles, and the thin man in the torn jacket shouted for the interpreter to keep reading. The second prisoner fought so hard that a medic had to hold his jaw, while an MP forced the swallowed thread from his lips. The first readable name belonged to a prisoner who had been marked transferred that morning, though he had never reached the transfer truck. The second name belonged to a sick man still waiting outside the shed. The third carried a black cross beside it, and when the interpreter read that mark aloud, several German prisoners looked toward the latrine yard at the same time. The guards searched the man who tried to destroy the thread and found a folded paper inside his boot heel. It named the same stitched list and described it as property to be recovered before American registration. The paper also carried a warning that any man found carrying sewn names must not reach the camp office. The thin prisoner finally gave his name as Otto Reiser, a former clerk from a retreating German supply unit. He said the names were men who had disappeared from columns before capture, men taken by field police, camp enforcers, or officers who feared witnesses would speak after surrender. The American lieutenant ordered every prisoner in the intake shed frozen in place and sent guards to close the doors. The routine search had turned into a live threat. One man had hidden names in his jacket, another had tried to eat the evidence, and the prisoners outside the shed were now being watched for anyone who might run. By the time the cloth strip was pinned flat on an evidence board, the first conflict was already clear. What guards found sewn into the German jacket was not contraband. It was a hidden roll call of men someone wanted erased before the Americans learned their names. Subscribe for more forgotten German POW stories like this one. The lieutenant ordered the intake stopped and moved Otto Reiser behind a guarded desk near the camp office. He could no longer stand with the ordinary prisoners, because every man who saw the cloth strip seemed to understand its meaning before the Americans did. The guards searched the latrine yard first because of the prisoners' reaction when the black cross was read aloud. Behind the wash trough, an MP found fresh mud scraped away from the base of a post. Under it was a tin tobacco box containing 3 identity tags, a pencil stub, and a torn corner of a medical card. One identity tag matched the first stitched name. The medical card matched the sick man waiting outside the shed. The pencil stub matched the tiny marks on the cloth strip, because its point had been cut into a needle shape and wrapped with thread for sewing. The escalation sharpened when the sick man was brought in for questioning. He saw the cloth strip and immediately tried to cover his number patch. The interpreter asked why, and the man said he had been told that anyone whose name appeared in stitching would be called out after dark. A German sergeant in the intake line shouted that the sick man was lying. The lieutenant ordered the sergeant searched in front of everyone. Inside his sleeve cuff, guards found a smaller stitched strip, not names, but instructions: latrine post, infirmary steps, transfer gate, 3 places where marked prisoners could be reached. The sergeant claimed it was an old repair note, but Otto identified the stitch pattern as a code used by unit clerks when paper was too dangerous to carry. He had copied names into fabric because paper could be taken, burned, or swallowed in seconds. The lieutenant sent 2 guards to the infirmary steps. They found nothing at first, then noticed a loose stone under the stretcher ramp. Beneath it was another tag, wrapped in cloth, with dried mud pressed into the lettering. The tag belonged to a man listed as escaped 2 days earlier. A driver from the morning transport was pulled from the motor line and shown the tag. He admitted a prisoner had vanished during a stop at a water point, but said a German prisoner leader told him the man ran into the trees. Otto shook his head and pointed to the stitched black cross beside the same name. The driver led MPs to the water point outside camp. There they found boot tracks, a broken strap, and a jacket button near a drainage ditch. The search team did not find a body, but they found a second cloth strip tied to reeds, as if someone had tried to leave proof before being dragged away. When the strip returned to the camp office, it added 5 new names and 1 new mark, a circle around 2 numbers. The lieutenant ordered every prisoner with those numbers located immediately. One was in the holding yard. The other was missing from the official count. The escalation turned into a camp-wide alarm. Every intake line was separated, every prisoner leader was removed from contact with new arrivals, and all transfers were halted until the stitched names could be matched to living men, medical cards, or missing reports. Otto's jacket was no longer just a garment. It had become a map of hidden removals, coded threats, and names moving between fabric, tags, and fear, while someone inside the prisoner lines was still trying to destroy the thread before the Americans could follow it. The major consequence arrived when the missing circled prisoner was found in the laundry shed, hidden behind wet blankets and too frightened to answer his own name. He had cut the number patch from his jacket and pressed it under his foot because he believed the mark on the cloth strip meant he would be taken next. A medic examined him and found bruises across his ribs, but the man kept pointing toward the laundry carts. Guards searched the carts and discovered a false bottom under one wooden frame. Inside were folded prisoner letters, 3 torn sleeve patches, and a small needle case wrapped in paper. The needle case tied the evidence together. Its thread matched Otto's jacket strip, the smaller instruction strip, and the reed strip from the water point. The lieutenant ordered the laundry shed sealed and placed 2 MPs at each door while the remaining prisoners were moved away. The German sergeant tried to shift blame onto Otto, claiming the clerk had sewn the names to create panic and win American favor. The accusation lasted only until the sick man identified the sergeant as the one who ordered prisoners to bring jackets to the laundry after evening roll call. The consequence spread to the prisoner hierarchy. 3 prisoner assistants were removed from their posts. Their bunk boxes were searched, and inside one box guards found a schedule showing which new prisoners had coats, which had missing tags, and which men were considered safe to question after dark. The lieutenant ordered the holding yard divided into groups by arrival truck rather than rank. That broke the control of prisoner leaders who had been moving men based on hidden marks. New arrivals were counted by face, photographed, and assigned guards before anyone could speak to them privately. An American clerk comparing records found the next major break. 6 names on Otto's stitched cloth had been written into the camp ledger as transferred, but the transfer truck had never left the yard. Someone had altered the ledger before the men were even searched. The office clerk who handled the ledger was questioned and admitted he had copied information from German prisoner assistants because the intake was moving too fast. He said they supplied numbers, spellings, and status notes, and he never knew the word transferred could hide a disappearance. The lieutenant ordered the ledger pages removed, sealed, and replaced with a new face count book. Every German prisoner in the affected intake would stand in front of an American clerk and answer to his name directly, with no German assistant speaking for him. The major consequence became visible when living men were pulled from the wrong categories. One man marked escaped was found in the kitchen line. Another marked transferred was in the infirmary. A third marked unfit was missing, though his bunk roll had been placed neatly in the holding yard. A search for the third man led to the coal storage pit. He was alive, bound with scarf cloth, hidden behind sacks, and wearing a jacket that was not his own. Inside that jacket seam was a freshly cut empty space where a cloth strip had been removed. By evening, the stitched names had forced the Americans to rebuild the entire intake system. The prisoner assistants lost access. The old ledger was treated as evidence, and Otto Reiser's torn jacket sat on the table as the object that exposed how men could vanish while still existing on paper. The major reversal began when Otto asked to see the empty seam from the jacket found in the coal pit. He ran his fingers over the stitches and said the missing strip had not been removed by the men trying to hide names. It had been removed by someone trying to carry new names out. The coal pit prisoner confirmed it. He said another marked man had cut the strip from his jacket before being taken toward the kitchen yard, hoping to pass it to any American guard. The missing strip was not destroyed evidence. It was a second warning still somewhere inside the camp. The lieutenant ordered the kitchen yard searched. Guards moved flour sacks, opened grease tins, and checked firewood stacks. Behind a loose brick near the bread oven, they found a cloth strip sealed inside wax paper, with fresh names sewn in red thread instead of black. The red thread strip changed the case completely. The first cloth list named men already marked. The second named men who had helped hide or move proof, including Otto, the sick man, the coal pit prisoner, and one American guard who had unknowingly received a note and placed it in the wrong box. The reversal turned suspicion away from Otto and toward a wider rescue effort inside the prisoner group. Some Germans were not destroying the stitched lists. They were copying them, hiding them, and trying to get them into American hands before the prisoner leaders found them. A young German baker from the kitchen admitted he had hidden the wax paper. He said marked men brought cloth strips to the bread oven because the heat dried the wax and kept sweat from ruining the thread. He had hidden 3 messages in bread baskets, but only one reached the Americans. The lieutenant ordered every bread basket searched. One basket still held a folded cloth patch sewn into the bottom. It contained a map of the holding yard marked with dots at the laundry shed, coal pit, infirmary ramp, and latrine post. The dots matched every place evidence had been found. The German sergeant who tried to blame Otto was brought to the map. He claimed he had never seen it, but the baker pointed to a small burn mark at the corner and said the sergeant had thrown it toward the oven when a guard entered the kitchen. The reversal became public when ordinary prisoners began stepping forward with bits of thread, buttons, tags, and names they had hidden in clothing. The fear that kept the system alive began breaking because the Americans were no longer treating the fabric as contraband. They were treating it as testimony. Otto's role changed in front of the entire yard. He was no longer the suspicious man clutching his jacket at intake. He became the clerk who could read the stitches, match the marks, and explain which names were dead, missing, threatened, or protected by other prisoners. The lieutenant ordered a new evidence board built from the cloth strips, tags, ledger pages, and yard map. Each name was connected by string to a location and a witness. The object meant to hide names under seams had become the tool that revealed the route of every hidden threat. By sunset, the reversal was complete. The jacket did not expose one man's secret. It exposed a silent battle between prisoners trying to erase witnesses and prisoners sewing proof into clothing because thread was harder to burn than paper. The final irreversible event began when the old camp laundry furnace was opened after midnight. Guards had already searched the laundry once, but Otto insisted that the ash drawer was too clean for a building that burned coal all day. An MP pulled the drawer free and found folded metal plates under the ash, each plate pierced with tiny holes. Otto recognized them as sewing guides. They had been used to stitch repeated marks quickly into jacket seams, turning ordinary clothing into coded lists without needing visible writing. Behind the furnace, guards found a locked box wrapped in canvas. Inside were thread spools, identity tags, scraps of American intake forms, and a final cloth roll far longer than the others. It was sewn with dozens of names arranged in columns. The long roll contained two categories: men to disappear and men to protect. The same prisoner network had been split in two, with one side marking targets and another side secretly copying names to save them. The lieutenant ordered the roll photographed before anyone touched it. The German sergeant made one final attempt to escape responsibility by claiming the roll proved every prisoner was involved. Otto stepped forward and pointed to the thread colors. Black marked threats from prisoner enforcers. Red marked rescue copies. White marked names already given to Americans. The evidence now showed intent, method, and resistance. It proved which men had built the system, which men had used it, and which men had tried to turn the same code against them. The lieutenant ordered the sergeant and his assistants isolated in separate guarded rooms. A final search of their bedding uncovered stolen intake cards and a list of American Guard shifts. The prisoner enforcers had planned to move marked men during the hour when the newest guard, the one named on the red strip, stood near the kitchen gate. That young guard was questioned and realized he had once placed a folded cloth into lost property, thinking it was a torn uniform patch. He led MPs to the storage shelf. There, under broken boots, was the missing first rescue strip with 4 names still not matched. The camp was searched by those 4 names before dawn. 2 men were found in the infirmary under wrong spellings. 1 was found in the woodpile crew. The last was found locked in a tool shed, weak but alive, with his jacket turned inside out to hide the cut seam. The final irreversible order came at sunrise. No prisoner assistant could handle intake records, clothing, identity tags, medical cards, or transfers. Every German jacket from the affected convoy would be inspected seam by seam, and every hidden name would be entered into an American ledger before the man wearing it could be moved. Otto's torn jacket was sealed as the first exhibit. The cloth rolls, sewing guides, ledger pages, identity tags, and recovered intake cards were loaded into an evidence crate under guard. The sergeant and his assistants were taken away separately, unable to signal, threaten, or reclaim the names. The final moment came when the last missing man from the tool shed stood beside Otto at the intake desk and answered to his real name. The clerk wrote it slowly in a clean ledger, and Otto watched the ink dry, knowing that no seam, strip, or secret thread could hide that man again. By morning, every jacket from the convoy had been searched, every hidden strip had been pinned to the evidence board, and every living name had been written into the new ledger by American clerks. Otto Reiser's torn coat lay sealed in a crate, no longer suspicious, but protected. When the last rescued prisoner received a clean identification card, he touched the stitched hole in his old sleeve once, then walked into the yard under his real name. Most people know how World War II ended. Very few know what happened inside these prison camps. Subscribe for more untold WWII stories.